My friends, it's pretty wild how often we do mixing tips on here, but don't really have anything aimed at mastering. And a big reason for that is because I don't and never had made a living from only mastering. Yeah, I master my own stuff most of the time, but it's sort of in the vein that we all do it, right? Because we want our projects to sound complete. I'm sure most of us would love to have the budget to send things out to people like Mike Kalajian or Ted Jensen, but that's not always the case. And so we need to take things into our own hands. There are some common themed EQ problems that come up in mastering, though I've learned from people that do this for a living. By the end of this video, you'll know the key points to EQ your master bus going forward. So what's happening, fam? Miami here with JST, and one of the biggest tells that a track has been done by an amateur is that it isn't mastered, or at least, let me rephrase that, mastered properly. People are using limiters without correcting sibilance issues or having an extremely muddy low end, not realizing that they're actually enhancing the problems. In audio, pretty much everything is based on compression or properly EQing. This is not going to be a video telling you specific numbers. Instead, it will be teaching you many techniques mastering engineers use that are EQ based to help solve common problems, and will be focused more on the areas than a specific frequency number. So let's hop right into it. Dynamic EQ on the low mids. Somewhere between the 300 and 500 hertz area is a problem that occurs on most mixes. FabFilter Pro Q3 is extremely helpful here with its dynamic EQ section, and by setting up the dynamic EQ properly, we can wrestle those low mids into submission. I'm actually on a bit of a sub mission myself. Last year we had 30,000 subs, and I said I wanted to reach 50,000 by the end of the year. It made no sense because that was a wild reach, but guess what? We made it happen. And I'd like nothing more than to hit 100,000 subscribers by the end of this year. So if any of our content has helped you out in the slightest, do us the favor and hit that subscribe button, bell, and like button. My transition game is still crazy. Back to dynamic EQ. It's where the muddiness lies in a mix, usually due to the buildup of guitars and bass, and it's not difficult to control once you have an understanding of what to listen for. Let's take a listen to what this buildup will typically sound like. Once we can identify it, we can easily fix it. Adjust the bell until you feel like it's no longer an issue in the mix, and move on. Tone matching. Tone matching, or match EQ, is the easiest way to reference a track's EQ spectrum. It can essentially take your mastered track and give it the EQ curve of another mastered song, helping you see the potential issues your mix may have. Let's take a listen to a mix before and after it was EQ matched. The best part about this is it works visually, so you can literally see what is the biggest difference between your track and a mastered one that you love. I've done an entire video on EQ matching, so make sure to check that out if you need a deep tutorial on how to do it. One thing I want to point out that people don't tend to mention is you can EQ match a certain frequency spectrum of a song instead of the entire thing. So if you want to EQ match just the low end or the high end, you can move the parameters on something like Ozone around until you've captured what you need from the desired track. Just a little tip for you. Mid-side EQ. One of the most effective methods of EQ today is mid-side EQ. The most powerful use of this tool is enhancing the stereo image and width of your mix. You can make it seem wider by simply enhancing the higher frequencies while tightening up the lower ones. Much in the way that monoing out low end works, you can achieve a similar result by cutting everything on the sides under a certain frequency. I prefer this method to simply monoing out low end because it doesn't completely wipe out the frequencies and sounds a bit more natural to my ears. This will clean up your low end for starters, and it's the best use for the side part of mid-side. But when it comes to the mid, the most powerful thing is being able to accentuate specific elements of the mix. For example, let's say the vocals aren't loud enough. Sweep around and find the area the vocals live in and boost it. This is the simplest way to control elements in a song once it's already been mixed and changing it is no longer an option. When dealing with mid-side EQ, you need to realize that the higher the frequency is, the more noticeable phase issues will be. So using a linear EQ can be essential here. An EQ bump at 80 Hz. Miami, you said this video wouldn't be focused on specific numbers. Well, it wasn't focused on that. I'm doing it one time, give me a break. This is a little trick I picked up from my good friend Billy Decker. I had sent him a mix a long time ago and he must have been listening in his car at the time because he said, hey, you need to tap a couple dB at 80 Hz. And the reason that he explained this to me, I vividly remember, is it's the spot where your car speakers sit low end wise. Now, at the time, I had never really heard of anyone doing this, but I'm not gonna argue with someone that has 17 Billboard #1 tracks, right? So it got me thinking, why does this area seem to work so well? People tend to like getting a little bit out of 60 Hz for the kick and bass, right? And also 100 Hz, depending on whether you want the bass to sit above or below the kick. But maybe because it sits in between, it gives a nice little complement to the kick and bass at the same time. Let's take a listen to see what it sounds like on our regular listening environments versus just in a car. That was very much what the song needed. And I took a listen in my car, and sure enough, it made the low end stand out and feel a bit more filled in. So that's one frequency to always keep in the back of your mind. So let's go over all of these one more time. Dynamic EQ on the low mids, tone matching to a reference, mid-side EQing the low end, and an EQ bump at 80 Hz. Now, maybe your track needs one of these, or all of them. But these are common problem areas in a master as far as EQ that causes your mix to not translate from one place to the next. There's never a one-size-fits-all scenario, and since we're dealing with art, we'll always take our own creative liberties into account. But now you hopefully have a new perspective on how to approach your mix bus, and once you have all these under your belt, you will be one step closer to having the perfect mix. Do you feel like there's anything that I missed? Are there any specific things that you go for every time you mix? Would you prefer if I had simply said things like, add a shelf at this frequency for air, cut 4K, instead of giving you frequency areas? Either way, let me know in the comments below and we will talk about it like we always do. If you're an engineer on the come up, give this video a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe, you only have to do it one time, and tap that bell for notifications so when a video drops, you know the location. Until next time, I am out of here. Mic drop. Except as engineers we know, I'd never really drop this thing, because that get really expensive, even if it is a piece of shirt. Later.